The diner was quiet that evening, the kind of stillness that makes the hum of a neon sign outside sound louder than usual. Plates clinked, forks scraped gently against porcelain, and the smell of coffee, bacon, and grease filled the air like a memory of home. It was the kind of place where people went to breathe, to take a break from the chaos of the world. But all it took was one cruel moment, one reckless act of arrogance, to shatter that peace forever. An elderly black woman, her silver hair tied neatly in a bun, sat alone at the corner booth, quietly enjoying her evening meal. She had done nothing wrong, nothing to deserve what came next. Yet a man, young, loud, and drunk with his own sense of superiority, rose from his seat, hurled cruel words that poisoned the air, and then, in front of everyone, lifted his hand and struck her across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the diner, silencing everything, the conversations, the laughter, even the hum of the neon sign. Everyone froze. No one moved. And that's when the bully made his biggest mistake, because the frail woman he had just humiliated was not only someone's mother, she was the mother of the head of Homeland Security. If you believe that kindness is not weakness, if you believe in second chances and standing up for what's right, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us keep telling these stories that matter, stories that remind us of the strength in compassion. The woman's name was Ruth Henderson. At 73, she carried herself with the grace of someone who had lived through storms most people could not imagine. Born in the segregated South, she had endured poverty, discrimination, and heartbreak. But Ruth had also known love, community, and resilience. Her husband, a factory worker who passed away years ago, used to tell her, "Ruth, the measure of a person's worth isn't how much they have, but how much dignity they keep when the world tries to strip it away." She had held on to those words like a compass through life's darkest hours. That night, when she walked into the diner, she was simply hungry and tired, looking for warmth in a plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. The man who assaulted her was named Kyle Turner. He wasn't just some random drunk, he was a local troublemaker, known for running his mouth, picking fights, and making people uncomfortable wherever he went. Kyle thrived on attention, on making others feel small so he could feel big. He didn't care that Ruth was elderly, that she was fragile, or that she had lived a life he could never begin to understand. All he saw was an opportunity to flex his cruelty. When his hand struck her face, Ruth didn't cry out. She didn't scream. She simply closed her eyes, holding back the tears that threatened to spill, because she had always taught her children never to give power to people who tried to humiliate them. But inside, her heart broke. Not because of the pain, she had lived through worse, but because she wondered what kind of world allowed people like Kyle to believe they could treat others that way without consequence. The diner fell into an uneasy silence. Some people looked away, too afraid to intervene. A few whispered under their breath, uncomfortable but unwilling to get involved. The waitress, trembling, clutched her notepad like a shield, while an older man in the corner lowered his eyes to his coffee. In moments like these, silence can feel heavier than words, and Ruth could feel the weight of every pair of eyes that didn't rise to meet hers. But what no one knew, what not even Ruth herself fully grasped in that moment, was that this story would not end in silence. Because Ruth's son, Marcus Henderson, was no ordinary man. At 46, Marcus had risen from humble beginnings to become the head of Homeland Security, one of the most powerful positions in the nation. His life's work had been about protecting people, safeguarding them from threats foreign and domestic. Yet nothing had prepared him for the phone call he would receive that night from the very woman who had once taught him strength. When Ruth got home, she sat at her kitchen table, her cheeks still stinging. She didn't want to tell Marcus. She didn't want to burden her son, who already carried the weight of the country on his shoulders. But as the night grew quiet and loneliness pressed against the walls of her home, the tears she had held back in the diner finally came. Her hands trembled as she reached for the phone. Marcus's voice on the other end was calm, deep, and steady, but when he heard what had happened, his composure cracked. The man who had stared down threats to national security, who had remained unshaken during international crises, now found his voice trembling with rage and heartbreak. His mother had been assaulted, humiliated in public, and no one had lifted a finger to protect her. He swore then and there that justice would be served. The next morning, news of the incident began to spread. Someone at the diner had recorded the slap on their phone, and within hours, the video was online. The image of Ruth, her dignity intact even as she was struck, became a symbol. Outrage poured in from across the community. People who had once stayed silent now spoke out, ashamed that they hadn't stood up for her in that moment. The diner's owner issued a tearful apology, and the waitress who had once trembled now gave her testimony with fire in her voice. But for Marcus, this wasn't about public opinion. This was personal. He flew home that very day, stepping into his childhood neighborhood with the determination of a man who knew both the power of law and the power of love. Marcus didn't storm into the diner looking for vengeance. Instead, he went to his mother first. He sat at her table, held her hands in his, and whispered the same words she had once told him, "Dignity, Mom. We keep our dignity." Kyle Turner thought he could walk away. He thought that because Ruth was old, because she was black, because no one in the diner had stopped him in the moment, that he was untouchable. But when law enforcement came knocking at his door, backed by the unflinching eye of Homeland Security's reach, Kyle realized he had picked a fight he could never win. Yet what happened next surprised everyone. Marcus didn't demand Kyle be thrown into a cell and forgotten. Instead, he made sure Kyle was held accountable in a way that would change him forever. The court ordered community service, counseling, and public apologies. Kyle had to stand in front of the very community he had tormented, look into the eyes of the woman he had struck, and face the humanity he had denied her. It broke him down, not just the punishment, but the realization that he had become the very thing he once despised, a coward who hurt others to feel strong. For Ruth, healing didn't come overnight. But she found solace in the support that grew around her. Neighbors visited more often, strangers sent letters of encouragement, and even the diner where it happened became a place of quiet reflection, a reminder of how far kindness could ripple when people chose to care. And for Kyle, something shifted. He didn't transform into a saint overnight, but the weight of his actions forced him to see the world differently. He began to volunteer at shelters, to listen instead of lash out, to slowly learn the lesson Ruth's husband had once spoken, that dignity was the true measure of a person's worth. In the end, Ruth's pain became a spark, a moment that reminded a whole community, and eventually a nation, that silence in the face of cruelty is its own kind of violence, and that sometimes the quietest strength belongs to those who endure with grace until the world finally rises beside them. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the strength of mothers, of dignity, and of the power of justice with compassion, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support means the world, and it helps us spread more stories of resilience, humanity, and hope. Special request, before you go, please leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your experiences, or simply a message of support. Every word you write could be the encouragement someone else needs today.